Happy Friday, everybody. We are recording this Friday morning. So, any injury news after this, it's not our fault. Welcome to the 1 week season, week 13 breakdown with Hilow and myself. We got 6 games on the slate today for us. We're going to talk about the Broncos and Ravens, Packers at the Bears, Jags at the Lions. We're also going to talk about the Jets at the Vikings, Commanders and the Giants. We're going to end with the Titans and the Eagles. And with that being said, we're going to welcome in one of the hardest working, busiest men in our industry, Mr. Hilow. How you doing today, buddy?
What's going on, man? Yeah, I look forward to our times on Friday just to chat and take a little breather, take a step back and talk about some football.
Yeah, it's we were just talking about before we came on some of the ownership we're going to get into today, and there's some interesting stuff already developing on what games everybody's looking at this week, and on top of it, this is like crunch week for fantasy playoffs. Whether you make it, whether you don't, is all that hard work going to pay off? So this is the big week, and we got a ton of teams on bye, and it's just a really interesting slate. So I'm excited to get into it. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast at 1.5 speed, don't forget you can see our pretty faces over on YouTube and check us out there as well. We're streaming this, and you get a little extra data, a few more visuals to see when you're watching us there. With that being said, let's just get into the Broncos Ravens game. Again, this is, we've said this a few times this year, right? When I was looking at, potential playoff implications and things that were coming on, this is a game I actually had circled on the slate that I thought, okay, we're going to get into week 13. This is one of the games that I think is really going to matter. And lo and behold, we have the Broncos, who are just, to call them a dumpster fire would be like super nice. Like that would be there. I'll be shocked if Hackett's there at the end of this year. He's just been completely inept, and they can't trade Russ with that terrible contract. I don't know if you've really got a chance to look at what the actual dead money on that is, but it's insane.
Yeah, dude. This is obviously a game with teams with different goals here. The Broncos are playing with a backfield that consists of 3 guys that were not on the team to start the season. Latavius Murray is the lead back, got 82% of the offensive snaps last week.
Yep.
The year of our Lord 2022, we're talking about Latavius Murray as a lead back, a borderline workhorse back.
Hey, shout out. I got to give Sonic a shout out real quick on my single entry. He got me to play lat. As gross as it felt, along with that from a few others. But Sonic, shout out. Thank you for forcing me to make that ugly decision that I was very uncomfortable with.
Was that one of those plays that arose from a ayahuasca-induced medical coma meditation session?
I'm sure it was for him, but yeah. I kept looking at ownership and the pivot, and I'm just like, man, I can really leverage this game. And if he gets me 15, 20 points, I'm in a really good spot. It opened up some other stuff for me. And the only thing I personally missed last week is I pivoted last second from Jacobs to Adams. And while I did well, I would have monster mashed if I didn't want to leave this. I had the salary, so I swapped off, and I was like, I don't want to leave the extra $1,000 out. And I switched, and obviously know what monster mash Josh Jacobs did last week, captain 229 and 3 tutties, and it was just back to his normal self. So that's what I get for not playing him when I've literally played him every single week.
Yeah, same. I mean, that team is so concentrated. They are the most concentrated team in the NFL, and that is with majority of the season being played with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. Now, we're talking about another game, but it's play either Josh Jacobs or Devontae Adams, play them together. Just play them every week, basically.
Yeah. So we got over that. So we're gonna go back to that, but I had to give Sonic a shout out. And interesting how well they're. You talk about in your breakdown here that we're showing. How good the defense has been, but how just inept the offense has been. And we thought their defense would be solid, but no one saw this offense imploding this way.
Yeah, and the fact that their defense has been so good and their offense has been so bad, they are legit the worst offense in the NFL from a points per game perspective, and they are the best defense in the NFL from a points per game perspective. So that like tension started to boil over this past week.
Yep.
We had a little screaming match. I forgot the name of the defensive player who was screaming. A little shout and spout, little spout off between a defensive player and Russell Wilson on the sideline. So there's clear tension in the locker room. There's clear. They said what they had to say after the game. They're like, "Oh, it's just boys being boys during a football game." But
Right.
there's clear tension going on, and while we expect like Hackett is probably not going to last this season, there is the opportunity that they have an understanding between ownership, between GM, between Hackett that like, hey, give me the remainder of the year to try and figure some shit out moving forward, because they kind of backed themselves into a little corner here with the contract they gave Russ. They have pass catching weapons that don't really mesh well with what Russ brings to the table. I theorized earlier this season that that Russ's struggles are likely due to his pass catcher's inability to generate separation. You look at like who he had, and so like all these players that were able to generate separation: Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, like throughout his career in Seattle. Then he goes to like Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, who are like in the 60s in wide receiver rank at average separation at target this season. So I don't know what the fix is, but there's at least a chance that like Hackett has this, I don't know, understanding that like, hey, let me try and figure some shit out for the rest of the season as we move into, obviously we're turning our sights towards next year. That said, like the macro perspective of this game is like there are very few paths for this game to really open up. So that leads me with like, I don't really want to play anyone from this game, but with the caveat of like Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews always have to be considered, like regardless of matchup.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson is, he can put up those 45 plus fantasy point games. He can rush for 101 and throw for multiple touchdowns. And that's kind of what you're looking for. So this game is very much just like stay away or consider the exact pairing of Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. Because if you're basically, by saying you're playing Mark Andrews, you're saying he's optimal on this slate, which means he's putting the slate out of reach at the position. And if he's doing that, it's highly likely that Lamar Jackson is also having a nice game. So pairing them up is getting two positions right with one stone, basically. And outside of that, it's just kind of a stay away.
Yeah, for me, ownership's gonna dictate that, right? As we looked right now, Friday morning, Lamar and Andrews are both under 3%. Now, I don't believe for a second it's going to land there, but if we start, everybody's just like, look, the Broncos are going to shut them down. They're not going to be able to do anything. They still have a 24, point implied total. If I start looking that I can get them under 5% each, going to be hard for me to not take a chance on some GPP stuff with that stack at, because very rarely are we going to get under 5% Lamar and Andrews, even against what's been the best defense in the NFL with as far as points go.
And the upside is clearly there. I mean, the Ravens dropped 3 touchdown passes last week alone. One of those
I am well aware.
One of those was Mark Andrews. So the fact that like their offense is still being put in places to succeed is obviously a plus. The way I'm handling this situation personally, just because it is a very binary and polar outcome, it's like either the slate is out of reach with Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, or they completely fall on their face. The way I'm personally handling this is I got my exposure to this offense through the Battle Royale on Underdog, because Lamar Jackson is like a 5th round pick this week over on that format. So it's like I can get access to one of the higher priced players at the quarterback position in DFS on Underdog, where he's a 5th round pick. And so that's where that like, what did I call it? Shit, I forget what I call it in my course. A disproportionate upside. That's where that like disproportionate upside bet comes into play, because like over there, he's a second to last round pick, whereas you're still paying a relative premium for him in DFS.
Yep, and something to talk about here when we're talking ownership. I'm just looking at DK right now. one of the things that does matter is the slate, right? Are you on Yahoo? Are you on FanDuel? Are you on SD? Like, where are you? You know, are you on Underdog? Where are you playing at? Right, is also going to affect that, right? And I've enjoyed those over at Underdog. I've actually done really well on them this year, because I've found personally a lot of guys are just taking the chalk up front, right? And they're giving you like some great pivots, right? Like in that halfway through, right? Through the draft of those quick drafts, you're getting some great pivots off of there. But I agree. I'm not going to have much exposure. The one other way to, right, to get this is if ownership does rise for Lamar and Andrews, right? As you pivot, pay up at the Broncos D, you pay for that and hope they just shut them down and get a pick or two off of them. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna move on to a rumble up north with the Packers and Bears, and this is a interesting game. I'm excited with the Fields news we got yesterday, right? That he got a
Yeah.
full practice in. That was like, okay, like this could get, this is one of those games that, in the range of outcomes, while it's got a 44.5, we know how bad the Bears defense is, and we've seen how Swiss cheese the Packers can be. This is one of those games that all of a sudden at 44.5 could turn into 60, and it's coming in at really low ownership right now. Like,
Yeah.
really, in terms of, short of a couple players.
And I'm surprised that this game total has remained where it is at after Fields was ruled in. You look at like what they've done over the last 5 games with Fields, with a healthy Fields at quarterback.
Right.
They've averaged 29.6 points per game. They have had one game in their last 5 that has failed to go over 50 points, and that was the first one against the Patriots, where they actually won 33-14 in Foxborough.
Right.
So the fact that I think it's probably being held down by the uncertainty with Fields, right? But when we look at what has been said, look at what Fields has said, his head coach, his coaching staff, the medical team, what they have all said is we are comfortable playing Fields as long as we feel like he can protect himself. Fields said that, his head coach said that, the medical team said that, they all said that last week, right? They made the call late last week that they didn't feel like Fields could protect himself. Well, now as he goes to a full practice, to me that indicates the team of doctors, the medical staff, his head coach, he have all come together to say we feel like Fields can protect himself, whatever that means with a separated shoulder and partial ligament damage. I don't know what that means, but like to me, like reading the tea leaves here, it's highly likely that nothing really changes as far as how they approach this game from the snapshot of the last 6 weeks, because we know that they're a different team over the last 6 weeks. So like, to me, the upside of Fields, like Fields in this game, makes this game environment worth paying attention to just because of what he can do. We just saw last week a mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts set legit NFL and franchise records in rushing against the Packers. Why is that? Why is that? It's because like their linebackers play very aggressive, and then there's like a 10, 15-yard gap behind the linebackers in this like off-zone prevent coverage. Also, Darnell Savage is probably going to be out for the Packers, so that throws additional like communication issues that could come into play from a team that plays heavy rates of zone coverage. Obviously, with zone, there's more communication errors. With man, it's like you beat your man, you can go for 80. With zone, it's like if there's communication errors on the back end, that could lead to those like 80-yard like chunk plays, whatever. So there's also the uncertainty with Aaron Rodgers. There's Darnell Mooney, who is out for the season now with after he had surgery on his ankle. There's no pass catcher outside of Cole Kmet is expected to play more than like what 60 something percent. Yeah. So are they going to thrust Chase Claypool into the Darnell Mooney role? I don't know. Like all I saw from last week is that they ran no less than like 6 wide receivers through a rotation. It's like even Byron Pringle saw work. And it's like, where's he been all season? So there's a lot of moving pieces with this game. Like we got through the last game and like it was just like, yeah, consider Lamar Jackson plus Mark Andrews or consider fading. This game is like the polar opposite in what we have to like work through as we're trying to piece together like the micro aspect of one, this game environment, two, of each individual team, how they're going to attack, and then three, like how that fits into the macro state of the slate. And the primary decision point of like quarterback on the slate, because we have so many of the upside quarterbacks that can really like put the slate out of reach. You know, you have the Chiefs are playing the Bengals. Both of those quarterbacks have put up
Right.
Patrick Mahomes had like 5 straight games of 325 plus pass yards. We've seen Joe Burrow put up like 40 fantasy point games over the past 2 years. So like that game has the quarterbacks are
with
have immense
Jamar
ceiling.
most likely back this week.
Yeah, you have Lamar Jackson we just talked about. You have Jalen Hurts we just talked about. We'll talk about here shortly. You have now Justin Fields, and so like the adding an additional decision point into that like decision node of quarterback position, it adds a little bit of an interesting dynamic to the slate in that like by playing a quarterback outside of that elite range, you're saying that all 4, 5, 6 of those players fail to put the slate out of reach. Can that happen? Like, of course it can. Is it probably equally as likely that one of those guys puts up 35 plus fantasy points and you have to have him on the slate? Yeah. So there's a lot to consider there. And Justin Fields is just another piece of that puzzle in this like range of elite quarterbacks. And I would say that like it's very clear how you should optimally play him if you decide to go there, in the sense that like I've preached probably over the last year and a half that like the optimal way to play a mobile quarterback is to pair him with exactly one pass catcher, because Justin Fields or Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson are not putting the slate out of reach purely based on their legs. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
So if they're putting the slate out of reach, which is why you were paying up to play those players, because you're playing them because they were a had to have at piece, it is highly likely that they're bringing a pass catcher along with them. Just so happens that the only pass catcher for the Bears expected to be an every down pass catcher this week is Cole Kmet. So it's like consider Fields plus Kmet, consider Fields plus Kmet plus a bringback, and consider maybe running Fields naked if you're in smaller field stuff.
All right, you ready for a wild number on Fields right now? So
Yeah.
listen to this. Here are the quarterbacks currently, as of Friday morning, who have less ownership than Fields on the DK main slate. Are you ready? Right below him is Kyle Allen. Next is Daniel Jones. Next is Tua, which I get they're playing the Niners, but that's lunacy. Tannehill, Heineke, and the bottom owned is Russ. That's it. Those are the only quarterbacks on the slate of all these games that have less ownership, and they're all right there. Mm-hmm. People that are ahead. Let's talk about quarterbacks that are ahead of Fields right now. Mike White, Bryce Perkins, right? Like those guys currently are obtaining more ownership than Fields, and the ability to break a slate with Fields while the salary is up there, it's not even comparable. And one of the things you brought up that real well with that bring back is if you look at this season, look at Jalen and the week Devontae went off, Jalen and the week that he used AJ, right? The week Fields used Kmet, right? Like it's that one that one receiver with them, and then they're gone.
Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. The times that Mark Andrews was optimal, his quarterback was also optimal.
Yep. So I think this is going to be a great spot to leverage. You talked about too, right? Where do you go? Let's talk about some bringbacks on the Packers side. Obviously, the Bears defense is also just terrible. I had to make a cheese comment earlier to start because it's the Packers. But where do you see this going? Right? Rodgers finally came out and said, "Well, yeah, my thumb's broke, and we, that's why I can't throw." And finally came out and admitted it. What do you like in bringback wise in this game?
It depends. It depends on whether we see Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love. I think that the offense probably opens up more if Jordan Love plays. We've seen that Rodgers has struggled to throw past 5 yards downfield. over the last 4 or 5 weeks since his thumb has been bothering him. So like, and then we also saw like Jordan Love throw a 67-yarder to Christian Watson last week.
Yep.
You have Romeo Doubs, who's expected to come back from injury. So how is he going to reintegrate into this offense after he started the season playing ahead of Christian Watson, but Christian Watson has rattled off 6 touchdowns over his last 3 games, so you can't really like play him over Christian Watson now. So it would be like, I would say that Romeo Doubs is probably the one likeliest to shift into the slot if they're looking to get him onto the field, like all 3 of those guys on the field together, and share slot time with Randall Cobb. I think that's probably likeliest. Looking at their slot snap rates, it's like they don't really run a traditional like XYZ offense. It's more like that, like all of Allen Lazard, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs have spent time in the slot this season. But just like Christian Watson is the most athletic. He's 6'3". He runs a 4.3 640. Allen Lazard and Romeo Doubs are like 6'2", 6'1", around the same weight, and they are slow. They run like a 4.55 40.
Yep.
So it's likeliest to me that we see Christian Watson and Allen Lazard play primarily on the perimeter. We know that Allen Lazard is more useful to this team, I would say, in a pass blocking or a run blocking type role. He's kind of there, like they've clinged to these like blocking style wide receivers over the past few seasons in the draft, which is just absolutely maddening. Like Marquez Valdes-Scantling was their field stretcher, and then they had Equanimeous St. Brown, who was like the blocking guy with Allen Lazard and whatever. But I digress a bit. Basically, I don't know. I don't know who is optimal bring back. It could be, Aaron Jones is playing like 70% of the offensive snaps, but he's seeing AJ Dillon, I guess a semi reemergence of AJ Dillon over the last 2 weeks, which probably has something to do with Aaron Rodgers' thumb and his health and how they're approaching games. We know that like Aaron Rodgers is going to milk the play clock until like the final tick between every snap. So like Jordan Love probably isn't going to do that. So like the offense would open up a bit, I think, if Jordan Love played. But the much more important piece to this game environment is Justin Fields, clearly. So to me, it's like Justin Fields is playing. Okay, we should have some level of interest in this game environment. If Aaron Rodgers is playing, if Jordan Love is playing, matters less. But the offense, I think, would be a little bit more opened up should Jordan Love play. They'll be able to attack downfield a little bit better. Jordan Love has a big arm. That's never been his issue. It's just been processing, decision-making, pocket presence, reading a defense, which appears like he's made some steps forward after watching him in preseason this season, watching him play a quarter and a half last game. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, that'll be a good way for our 1 week season for Inner Circle members. Hilow and Xandamir do a breakdown on Saturday afternoon, evening, depending upon what country you are on. And that's for members only. It goes into a lot more DFS theory, and we'll have a lot more information at that point, and you'll be able to get some good breakdowns on that game. So now let's talk about the chalkity chalk. The Jaguars at the Lions, which I was excited about until I logged in and looked at ownership. And then I was like, wah, wah, wah. And then I went, oh. Yeah. And then I looked again and went, oh, but there's some really cool pivot points that don't have, right? They're just playing the chalk as of right now. And I'm going to probably try at this point to pivot off of this myself. I'm looking at, DJ Chark at 1%. Jamal Williams at 2%. And, some of these, lower owned guys, Josh Reynolds, trying to get maybe a pivot off of there. Meanwhile, you have, Amon, Zay, Etienne, Kirk, Lawrence, Ingram, Goff are all just steaming right up the board on ownership, and especially, Amon and Zay. How are you feeling about this game? It has, the 50-point total. I think we're going to see a ton of ownership here. How do you feel?
Yeah, so let's break this down a little bit. Right now, the highest expected owned quarterback on the slate is Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
3 of the top 4 highest expected owned wide receivers are from this game. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. The second highest owned expected running back is Travis Etienne. I'll put it like this. The reason that I am less worried about the chalk, about just playing the chalk from this game, is because the field doesn't know what the best chalk from this game is. You see Trevor Lawrence is getting steamed up around the industry. You have Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, who are like that offense is concentrated from the sense of like Travis Etienne is expected to see the bulk of the work at running back. And then you have the primary 4 pass catchers in Christian Kirk, in Zay Jones, in Marvin Jones, and then in Evan Ingram that play like majority of the offensive snaps. The problem is they're all seeing like 25% target rates. They're just splitting the workload. So yeah, like, and then with Trevor Lawrence, it's like the field sees that this offense had to pass a lot last week. The field sees that Trevor Lawrence put up 3 touchdowns. And it's like that's all they're seeing. I feel like the field is not paying attention to how the Jaguars arrived at that level of output, how this game environment is likely to play out. Both the Jaguars and the Lions are teams that do not push the envelope on their own. They have to have some outside force that is forcing them to open things up. That said, what is going to do that if both of them are just kind of at like doing this during the game? What are the outside forces that could open this game environment up? It's like a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown, a fumble for a touchdown, a pick 6. Okay, if that is like the likeliest way for this game environment to blow up, what am I placing my money on by betting on Trevor Lawrence and his pass catchers? I'm betting on the like 1.5% chance of a special team score. That is not something that I, 1, want to be placing my hard-earned money on, and 2, don't want to be looking at when the ownership is expected to be high on those pieces. So for me, the very clear best plays from this game on paper, and probably the 2 most underpriced players respective to their expected range of outcomes, are Travis Etienne and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just play those guys. Like, I don't want to be fucking around with trying to play like DJ Chark okay. The 2 interesting pivots for me from this game are DJ Chark and DeAndre Swift.
Right. That's why I brought him up. Like, those are the 2 pivots for me.
Yeah. So DJ Chark worked his way up to, I believe, 73% of the offensive snaps. I forget the number, but that's my memory.
I'd have to look it up again. I know it's close to that. I looked at it on Monday. Yeah. I don't remember today.
Yeah, it's in the write-up. Go check it out. Yep. So that was his second game back from injury after playing like 17% of the offensive snaps in his first game back. So we know that DJ Chark is like back to being the second option in this pass game, particularly because TJ Hawkinson is gone.
73%. Good job, buddy.
Nailed it. So yeah, like Chark is probably going to see his snap rate increase again. He's probably going to be close to an every down player, and he has a little bit more of a downfield role. The problem is the Jacksonville defense is built from the outside in. They want to force things to the middle of the field. They want to swarm. They want to limit yards after the catch, and they want to limit splash plays against. That plays very naturally into what Amon-Ra St. Brown brings to the table, a little bit against or limiting to DJ Chark's game. But that said, he's a high ADOT downfield perimeter wide receiver that is playing a high zone-based defense. So again, those communication issues can happen. He can get behind. He can put up a 4 for 105 and 2 touchdown game in this kind of game environment. So that is an interesting pivot from the sense of like you're getting a cheap player that has a downfield role in a solid expected game environment. Has a 51-point total with a pick'em spread. So like that is a good game environment for us to attack. The other thing is DeAndre Swift is off the injury report entirely for the first time since week 1. He has been on the injury report every week since week 1.
I am well aware, as someone that owns a tractor trailer load in season long and best ball, that has not been fun.
Yeah. So then you pull up his splits. Like you can, the magic of like metrics right now is like just pull up the splits of DeAndre Swift when on the injury report and when off the injury report. And it's like one of the highest deltas in fantasy production of any player in the NFL. So like if he's healthy, like He's going to see some work. He's going to be involved in the pass game. He has red zone usage. He has goal line usage. He has everything you want from a play. He's also priced at a very affordable price. He's a direct leverage pivot off of Travis Etienne, off of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Expected ownership is supposed to be minuscule. So he's very interesting in that sense. It's not a likeliest scenario outcome, but it's like if this game plays out differently than public perception, he's a nice piece to have. For me, for single entry stuff, for even for large field stuff, it's like I'll just let the field fuck around with Trevor Lawrence and his pass catchers, and I'll just play the best players from this game, which are Travis Etienne and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I agree. That's a great way to approach this and move on there. So, speaking of ownership, we're going to move on to the Jets and Vikings game. And I'm scratching, I understand some, but also scratching my head a little bit as far as when I start looking at ownership at overall and who's where at this. This is an interesting spot for me, especially with as good as, the Jets D has been. How are you feeling about this game? What do you see in pivot points with the Jets and Vikes?
This is a game that has a game environment that is likeliest to underwhelm. That said, it largely, in my eyes, after breaking down this game, it largely, in my eyes, depends on how the Jets choose to handle Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is like top 5 in pretty much every wide receiver metric you want to look at, but he's such an integral piece to this offense in the sense that Kevin O'Connell has designed his offense around figuring out interesting ways and unique ways to get Justin Jefferson the ball in space.
Yeah, like the best guy on the field. Like, imagine that.
Yeah, so, I mean, he came from Sean McVay coaching tree, which we've seen what they have done with Cooper Kupp and designing an offense around getting their best player the ball in space, and that's kind of what they're doing with Justin Jefferson. That said, the primary defensive alignment from the Jets this season has been moderate blitz rates behind a 3-4 front with heavy zone coverage behind. They are able to generate organic pressure up front through not having to blitz, and that allows them to settle into this layered zone coverage scheme behind that, and with dynamic linebackers that both drop in coverage, they blitz, they do all kinds of stuff. So from a schematic from the perception of the schematics of the Jets defense, they are primarily a zone-based defense. That said, Justin Jefferson is it's Tyreek Hill and it's Justin Jefferson in wide receivers that absolutely shit stomp zone coverages.
It's not even close when you look at the metrics.
It's those two guys and then everybody else. So correct. Are the Jets going to maintain their high levels of zone coverage? Are they going to play sides? Are they going to shadow with sauce? I have no idea, but to me, it's probably least optimal to maintain how they've played defense this season against a wide receiver like Justin Jefferson. Because, again, Kevin O'Connell has designed ways to get Justin Jefferson the ball in space, in double moves, in all kinds of things. And it just destroys zone coverage. So the one path, I would say, to this game environment blowing up is Justin Jefferson. So how the Jets manage to handle Justin Jefferson is probably the main path to this game environment blowing up. On the other side of that coin, quarterback Kirk Cousins has been absolutely atrocious when under pressure. He's very good at handling the blitz in the sense that he's a veteran guy. He's savvy. He can read where the blitz is coming from, and he can find the holes behind that. And now he has another piece to play with that kind of game plan with TJ Hawkinson. So I'd expect the Jets to lower their blitz rate, to play man coverages, particularly on third down, which is kind of counterintuitive to how NFL defenses are built nowadays. And I would expect they are aggressive in the sense of their front three and maybe a linebacker or two are going to be involved in trying to get to Kirk Cousins. That's how, if I were in Robert Saleh's shoes, that's how I would handle it. He's an NFL coach. I'm not. I don't fucking know what they're going to do, but that's how I would handle it. That just leaves a very wide range of outcomes for this game environment. And the field is saying Justin Jefferson is in a difficult matchup. I'll look to the secondary option in Adam Thielen because he just put up 21 fantasy points. Like that is just how the field is handling this situation. It's like, well,
Wild to me.
Adam Thielen has one game above 20 fantasy points.
Right.
He has one game of double-digit targets. He is not he is not likeliest to succeed here. If you're pivoting off Justin Jefferson and you want exposure to this game, play TJ Hawkinson because he's the player likeliest to succeed if the Jets are wreaking havoc in the backfield. If they are getting relentless pressure on Kirk Cousins, it's likeliest to be TJ Hawkinson and somewhat less so, but somewhat probably more involvement from KJ Osborne. That said, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, say interesting to me, right, when I saw that. So that's when I brought that up. I'm like, man, like it's to use some poker terms, right? They're tilted and it's pot lagging, right? They're looking at it, they're tilted, they're like, man, I should have got it there, and they're pushing their chips in on a hand they shouldn't be pushing their chips in on. That's kind of the way I'm looking at this, especially when I start seeing that who's owned higher than Jefferson right now. Thielen. I'm not even going to talk about the Zonovan Knight thing like that. That's beyond me. Cook and then Conklin, right? Conklin has double the ownership that Hawk does already. And I understand that a little bit, but interesting spot when Kelsey's on this slate and Andrews.
Yeah, so to give a little sneak peek into like the DFS section, DFS plus interpretation section, I basically laid it out as Zonovan Knight is okay. Right. Garrett Wilson is okay. Tyler Conklin is okay. But the field seems to be treating them as if they are in this can't miss spot. The Justin Jefferson, we broke down how he is going to likely influence this game, the Jets, how they handle it. I would 100% be fading Adam Thielen this slate. I don't want to be fighting ownership on a low ADOT guy who needs 100. Like, he needs double-digit looks to break 100 yards, and he's likely going to need multiple scores to provide a GPP-worthy score.
Honestly, like one of the elite pass defenses in the league.
Yeah, on a slate like this, because we have to approach our decision-making processes different based on the state of the slate. The state of the slate last week was like, there's a ton of low game totals there. There's no certainty. Let's take some shots on some guys who can get us 4x. That's not going to fly on this slate. I think JM put it about as best as you can for this slate. He said, if we had like unlimited salary, you would see 300 plus fantasy scores this week. We might 100%. still see 270s. We might see some scoring this week. So a 20-point game from Adam Thielen, a player like Adam Thielen, who has very, very small paths or few paths to hitting 100 yards and 2 scores to give you that like 30, 35 fantasy point game that you're going to need this week is like, it's mind-boggling why the field is gravitating towards a profile like that when we know going into this slate, like reading the slate, this first thing we should be doing on a week like this, like we know we're going to need some high fantasy point totals. So it's this like this nebulous range of like the field doesn't know. It's a similar situation to the Jacksonville pass offense. It's like, does Trevor Lawrence have 40 fantasy points within his range of outcomes? I would argue like that's less than 1% chance outcome. Less than. That's the same thought process for Adam Thielen. Just very low chance of actually providing something that is like worthwhile for us to be playing on a slate like this.
Yeah, it's I'm not going to have a ton of exposure there. For me, it's Justin or go home. So speaking of very little ownership and something that I don't want much to do with, we're going to move on to the Washington football team versus the New York Giants. Kudos to Daboll. I think he's done an amazing job with what he was given. Right, his first year, he was able to draft a few guys, but he's building around what he has, and I said it last week. I think he has, coach of the year opportunity. That being said, um, ownership is wonky here in this game. I'm interested to see if you want any exposure. When we just talked about the exact thing of it's going to take 250 to 300 to win this week, in my opinion, as well. Especially after reading what some of the stuff JM has said, and really getting to look at it from that sharp a view. I don't see any less. So in a game total that's at 40, but has real low ownership, are there any one-offs you like in this game?
Scroll down a bit. We'll start there. Scroll down to the
Okay.
game overview.
Okay.
For those listening, the game overview of this game is both teams rank in the bottom 7 in pass rate over expectation. Giants hold the league's 5th highest overall rush rate, while the Commanders rank 11th. Commanders boast a stout run defense, while the Giants have been gashed on the ground. Giants have generated the fewest explosive plays this season, while the Commanders surprisingly rank top 10 in both explosive rush rate and explosive pass rate, albeit with the asterisk that those have all been Antonio Gibson and not Brian Robinson. That's so. And then the probably the one of the most important pieces also is this game is about as close to a must-win for each of these teams as can be for a Week 13 game, in the sense that both of these teams are in 6th and 7th in the NFC playoff picture right now, with just over a month left to play in the season. And it's likely that the winner of this game will control their own destiny. The loser will have an uphill battle to make the playoffs. So what do we see from these division games that have high importance late in the year? We typically see the percentage solution is we see a slugfest. We see these teams not wanting to make the mistakes to lose the game. Compounding that is the leans and the how these offenses are run and how these defenses are built. The Giants are a Wink Martindale defense. That means that they are like nails in the red zone. They don't allow a lot of touchdowns. They're top 3 in red zone touchdown rate.
Yeah, they're top 3 this year, right? Yep.
Yeah, and that's dating back to that's just Wink Martindale. He designs a defense dating back to his time in Baltimore where they just don't allow scoring in the end zone or in the red zone. It's like the same thing as Bill Belichick. They just they are nails in the red zone. That's just what they are. And then you look at the composition of how each of these teams are going to try and win. It's both of them are going to be wanting to run the football. Sorry about that. I had a positive cough. The other layer of that is Saquon Barkley's price is remaining above his standard range of outcomes on a weekly basis this season. Because why is that? It's because the pricing algorithms take into account ownership over I don't know what the snapshot is, but this is confirmed. They take into account ownership from previous however many slates. So that means that the field is still playing Saquon Barkley at a fairly heavy rate because his fantasy production, his pass game involvement has been low this year compared to historic Saquon Barkley. So the field is playing Saquon Barkley without realizing that his role is different this year. So that is something that I'm just completely fading until the end of time, until Saquon Barkley has a changed back in role. Basically, he's closer to a yardage and touchdown back than he has ever been in his career. So with that, he's kind of X'd off the list. Now we look at the Commanders' backfield, and it's kind of actually a little bit interesting. Antonio Gibson was downgraded from a limited participation on Wednesday to a DNP on Thursday. That's typically not a good sign for a player's availability come the weekend. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what their practice report says today on Friday. But it's I think all backs in Washington not named J.D. McKissic, Brian Robinson, and Antonio Gibson have seen something crazy 14 total offensive snaps this season. J.D. McKissic is on IR. If Antonio Gibson is removed from that puzzle, now it's just Brian Robinson at a depressed price in a matchup against a Giants team that is allowing the most rush yards per carry to opposing backfields this season at it's 5.02 yards per carry. Yep. So that's something that's interesting. There are very few paths to this game environment blowing up, so it'd be a one-off or a fade. And if I were choosing a one-off, should Antonio Gibson miss here, it's going to be Brian Robinson. introduces an interesting leverage point from the sense of roster construction and salary allocation this week.
Yeah, I like the opportunity to leverage that possibly with their interesting that Gibson's still at 10% even with the news. I thought that'd come in a little bit lower today, but seeing Gibson there at 10% to start was interesting. And if you're watching us and you see me looking off, I'm looking at one of my screens. I was pulling up some data and Excel was being stupid. Because we're going to talk about in Hilow's write-ups probably our favorite game, both of us, of the write-ups that Hilow did this week, and we're going to end off here, and we want to leave a little extra time for the Titans at the Eagles. So much opportunity in this game to go so many ways. I love what you end with, and I want to start there. One of the revenge narratives on the slate is A.J. Brown against his former team. You know, Brown felt slighted. They traded him instead of paying him after the work he put in and delivered. Let's start with A.J. From that point, because he's right now not being owned, which is just wild to me. Do we expect that to go up some? Absolutely. But you give me under 5% AJ Brown in a revenge game and let me pair him up with Mr. Hurts, and I'm going to stack that.
So backing up a bit, there's a lot of moving pieces with this game environment, with the Eagles, with the tight. There's a lot of things that contribute to a wide range of outcomes for this game. We'll put it like that. The first is Philadelphia is now a highly concentrated pass offense with Dallas Goedert out of the lineup. They are
so sad.
They are running Quez Watkins as they're basically Quez is like their deep threat. He has been that then the entire season. They are now running or trying to get him touches close to the line of scrimmage because they don't have that like center of the field presence in Dallas Goedert. They've also reduced the average intended air yards at target, or the ADOT, for Devontae Smith to try and compensate for the fact that Dallas Goedert is not in the lineup. So Quez Watkins is expected to play like 85% plus of the offensive snaps here. Their primary tight end, Jack Stoll, has been like at 80%, I think, in both of the games without Dallas Goedert in snap rate, and he's seen one target. So he's like completely just remove the tight end discussion from, or the tight end position from this discussion. So knowing that, it's like Quez Watkins he's going to see work around the line of scrimmage to try and get the ball into an explosive playmaker, and he's going to see some downfield work. And then when you compare like side by side, if you do like a blind comparison between AJ Brown and Devontae Smith about their like underlying metrics for this season, you would be hard pressed to figure out who is who. They are almost identical in most of their underlying metrics, their targets per route run rate.
You wouldn't know who it was if we covered their names.
Exactly. So that's another layer to this. Then you add in the revenge narrative with AJ Brown, and I think that revenge narrative is a little bit like we can place a little bit more emphasis than the standard revenge narrative, which I really never pay attention to. This one has me a little bit paying attention to it because AJ Brown came over and immediately like entered the like best friend zone with his quarterback, Jalen Hurts. They are very close. They do a lot together off the field. And they are just like, they established this like early brotherhood. Additionally, we'll say AJ Brown, we know that he was upset with how his situation was handled in Tennessee. He was coming off of his third season in the NFL, which is starting to get into contract negotiation time. And instead of even talking to AJ Brown, they traded him. And on draft night of it was round one, right? On opening night of draft night. It was
wild.
Yeah, it's like we got this random report that like AJ Brown's traded to Philly, and it's like, what? This is the first I'm hearing of this. So it was surprising. If it was surprising to us, it was surprising to AJ Brown. So he felt slighted. He felt like the Titans didn't even pay him the time of day to even open the contract discussions with him. They just like shipped him off like, you're done to us. So the fact that he felt slighted, the fact that he has a very close relationship with Jalen Hurts, and the fact that Jalen Hurts, I don't want to call it him petty, but he is somebody that pays attention to taking care of his pass catchers. We saw earlier this season when A.J. Brown had his first blow-up game and Devontae Smith laid a goose egg. He, like, reports came out that after the game, there was video of it where he went over to Smith and he's like, it's okay, dude, I got you next game. And next game, he fed Devontae Smith.
Yeah,
so
he
like,
went monster next game. He had
yeah,
like 179 or something.
Yeah, and that was Smith's first game with double-digit targets this season. So
right.
What that highlights to me is like Jalen Hurts. We talk about like a player's coach. Jalen Hurts is like a player's quarterback. He wants to take care of his dudes. Like if we put up like a spectrum of like give a fuck level from the quarterback position about like his players, Jalen Hurts would be on like one end of the spectrum, like complete opposite of like Kyler Murray. It'd be like that would be the bracket of this.
I want to make that spectrum. A t-shirt.
Yeah, it's like give a fuck level, Kyler Murray, and then Jalen Hurts is on the other side.
Right.
So like knowing that, like that all comes into play where there's like so much going on with this game. Also, we know that Jalen Hurts is a mobile quarterback. We know that the Eagles have this low pass rate. We also know that Tennessee are one of the more extreme pass funnel defenses in the NFL. They are number one in DVOA against the run. They are nails against the run. That is just because their head coach was a former lineman. He or linebacker, fucking linebacker, whatever.
Linebacker.
Yeah. So, but he's like this in the trenches coach from dating back to his like playing days playing, and they want to win at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. So that is how they've built their team over the last 5 years. That is how they are approaching games. That is how they have been so successful in overperforming their expectation in each of the last 3 seasons. This was a team that they were the number one seed in the AFC last year. So like there's a lot going on with this game environment. The easy answer is to just buy into the narrative and play A.J. Brown. I would posit that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are probably still equally as likely to succeed if, again, another caveat, if the Eagles open up their offense earlier in the game. If you think about, like, from a coaching perspective, how the Eagles, like, how I would want to approach this game from a game planning perspective against a team like the Titans, where it's like they have no pass game options. It's like Treylon Burks is their only, like, splash play generator, and they want to build their offense around Derrick Henry. It's like, look at what Derrick Henry has done this season. Derrick Henry in blowouts, in blowout wins, in losses, in close games, it doesn't matter. Across the board, Derrick Henry's touch per snap rate is fairly even in all game environments. So how do you remove the Titans' like best player off the field? You score early. How are you most likely to score early in this game? Through the air. So if I were sitting in the team meetings this week, I'd be like, yo, we need to open the game on our first 2 drives. We need to pass the ball on first down. On second down, we need to drive the field and put up early points. That will effectively remove Derrick Henry from the game and make our chances of winning that much higher. The other side of that is now we're into like the assumption of rational coaching. Are they going to do that? I don't know. They have been this like ground-based team. If they continue to be this ground-based team, even with a mobile quarterback, it is increasingly likely that Derrick Henry and the Titans are able to run their game plan against a run funnel defense and stay in the game for longer. So this game environment has a really, really wide range of potential outcomes. It's almost entirely based on how the Eagles choose to open the game offensively. Again, I laid out like how I would do it. I have no idea what they're going to do. The assumption of rational coaching has bit us in the ass before, and I've learned my lesson from that. So there's a really, really wide range of potential outcomes. Now you're looking, like you brought up earlier, in the expected ownership. It's like if A.J. Brown was expected to be like one of the top 3 owned wide receivers on the slate, it'd be like, okay, I'll throw my money in Devontae Smith, or I'll fade this game entirely because it has a wide range of outcomes. But he's not. He's expected to be under 3% owned. So it's like, okay, now I have some pretty heavy interest in like buying into this revenge narrative. So,
all right, so now I'm gonna flip the switch here and talk about a little stats here. So average fantasy points allowed by the defense in PPR this year. All right, so this is gonna make you feel dirty when I say this, okay? But against quarterbacks, Philly is one of the worst defenses in the NFL for giving up fantasy points to quarterbacks. Now, we know some of that is because they pushed the ball and teams have had, right? They've come out and smashed them in the first half, and teams have had to come back and throw against them. But when you look at that, it goes there. Is there any game environment in which you try to get crazy leverage off the field and you go Tannehill with, a pass catcher like Burks and then come back on the Philly side?
I would say no, just because of the state of the slate. It's very, very, very unlikely that Tannehill matches the top quarterbacks on the slate. It is, if you want to play to that kind of back and forth shootout style game environment, I would primarily be looking at Jalen Hurts plus either Devontae Smith or AJ Brown and bring it back with Treylon Burks, who is the upside generator for Titans through the pass game. He's also increased his level of participation each week coming back from injury. We know that he's going to be probably around this 65 to 75% snap rate range, but he is the player that has the highest targets per route run rate on the team. He is the player who has the highest yards after catch per reception, all the things that are like indicative of an upside generator is Treylon Burks for this offense. So I would say it's far more likely that Treylon Burks succeeds without Tannehill than it would be for those two to succeed together.
Good way to explain it. I got asked about that yesterday, so I thought this would be a good spot to have that conversation about it, because it was that somebody was digging into the stats and had hey, right, and had to have the conversation with them that, right, while we want to look at the stats, we also have to look at game environment, situations. There's so much, right, so much more involved, and with all the data now, you can really get lost pretty easy. And unfortunately, like, you can see people throw game theory out the window, which I know, and for those that don't, that maybe this is one of the first few times, you're just getting into this. If you want to learn game theory, the man I'm on this podcast with here is one of the best in the business at it. He understands it at a level that makes my brain hurt. And, but I enjoy it. I have to listen to his game theory stuff a couple times to get through there. And some of the times when I'm asking questions, it's because I want him to explain the game theory, right? I'm kind of leading him into where I'd like to see him go to talk about why you wouldn't do that. Not only why I want to play a certain player away, but also why you don't. So I'm really interested in this game. I'm going to be watching ownership like a hawk, and I'll be interested to hear where we're at come Saturday afternoon with you and X on this.
Yeah, man.
So as we're ending up here, tell me, over the next 2 weeks, as you've looked at, we're going to talk a little best ball here. For those that don't know, Hilow and I are pretty involved in the best ball arena, heavily invested again this year. And who do you need, as you look at some of your teams, who are you needing big weeks out of as we finish up these last 2 weeks to get into the playoffs here?
I need Justin Fields to stay healthy and play.
You and me both. Fields is my second highest owned quarterback on Underdog. He's my third highest on DK. And if Fields stays healthy, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I want to look at what my exposure is to Fields real quick.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Are you sitting down?
Oh boy, 35%.
35% Fields.
Oh man, I nailed it on the head.
Yep.
Because I'm close. I'm really, really close to that on what my exposure is to him. I'm at 32. Yeah, so I need it. It was his price, and when we were getting him, right? Like, and it's this upside that, hey, if when we're talking about range of outcomes, whether it's daily fantasy, whether it's season long, whether it's best ball, especially in best ball and DFS, right? And the range of outcomes at his price, where we were getting him compared to so many other quarterbacks, opened up the ability to get him going, right? I have a ton of, which has been great so far, right? I have a ton of teams that I have fields with Justin Jefferson. I have fields with Devontae Adams. I have fields with Josh Jacobs, some of the guys that have just smashed this year. And I stacked a lot of fields with Komet. I'm pretty highly owned on Komet, so that's, helped. It wasn't fun to start the season. It was downright
Yeah.
ugly, but he's definitely come along and go from there. So those will be some fun sweats as well, and interested to see. And once again, if you guys are looking, join our Discord. There's so much free information that we give, because we want you to see the value. One of the things you'll see with 1 week season is our tagline, right? Have a boat, we'll teach you the fish, right? We just don't want to tell you, hey, just go play this. You have a ton of people here that are way, way smarter than I'll ever be, that are really good at this, and helping everybody understand how to pivot, how to grow, how to understand game theory, and there's so much free information that one of the reasons to do it is because you come in and then you see the value and it's like, well, this is a no-brainer. If I'm getting this, imagine what the paid content is. The paid content, I'm biased, but I think in the DFS field, our paid content is one of the best in the game.
I got to bounce, man.
Yep. Thanks, fam. Everybody have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Later.